Hello and welcome then to Chapter 17 of RWR Plays TEW 2020. We are of course playing as Eric Bischoff, booking WCW in 2001 when Fusion Media Ventures bought the company instead of WWE in this alternative universe. And as promised last week, I thought I would show you the company's size following another increase in popularity, because we have indeed grown to medium size. We've achieved 59 popularity in the Southwest region, which was the goal in order to get there, and that's quite a big deal because it now means that we can do some things that we hadn't previously been able to do. You can see in order to move up to big size, you have to achieve 77 popularity in at least 5 mainland American regions, which must include all of Western America, the Northwest and the Southwest regions. So that's going to take us a long time. We're going to not get there for quite some time, if at all. Obviously in this save we will see. I don't know how long the save's going to go on, but certainly that will take us some time, whatever the case. But what that has meant, as I said, is that we can now do some things that we previously had not been able to do. One of those things is forge an agreement, a talent trading agreement with All Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't know how exactly we're going to use that yet. I didn't know whether or not we were definitely going to be able to do that once we got up to medium size, but I've checked and we can, and we've now actually put that in place. So now it's about figuring out long term how that's going to work and how we're going to use that to our benefit. In addition, when we moved up to medium size, I decided it was time to add some more television. So I had a comment quite early on in the series, actually, on YouTube about, are you going to add any other shows? And I was originally reluctant to do so because I've really been enjoying just the rhythm of booking Nitro week after week and then forward to the pay-per-views and then going back into Nitro. But there is one gap in what we need, and one thing I tried to explore was creating a development territory. I didn't want to buy one, so I wanted to I didn't want to set one up because it costs a lot of money. So I wanted to instead see if I could forge some kind of relationship with a lower independent in North America to see if they would take on kind of development wrestlers from me. Unfortunately, no one would accept my offer. I guess medium size is just not big enough for those companies to do that, which is a bit of a weird thing because you thought they would be, that WCW would be big enough given the popularity you've now got. But anyway, that didn't happen. So instead what I've done is I've decided to create or bring back WCW Saturday night. Now we're only going to make it a 1 hour show, but as I say, the purpose of that really is to be able to develop wrestlers. We've obviously struggled a little bit with our women's division. We've got the women's round robin going on and their ratings are not increasing particularly high, and that now that we've got an increased level of popularity, we're getting closer and closer to that popularity matching the general quality of our shows, which means that growing will be harder and harder. So I wanted to give us the best chance possible of doing that by removing some of the segments that are doing less well on Nitro and perhaps putting in more stronger content. So effectively the women are likely longer term to be more on Saturday night, at least in the period where we're trying to kind of introduce them to the crowd and grow their popularity. But also this will allow me to bring in some younger guys who've got lots of potential but of course are completely unknown. It'll also allow me to bring in those wrestlers that I do bring in on a talent trade agreement with All Japan and build their popularity up before I kind of put them into the sort of main sort of canon on Nitro and stuff. So yeah, WCW Saturday Night has been added to the schedule, and the first episode is going to be this coming Saturday. So we will also be bringing you not just Nitro today, but also the return episode of WCW Saturday Night. So without further ado, let's go into that. Well, apologies, there was one thing I wanted to do before we go into that, and that's quickly recap our last show, which came from the Colorado Springs Auditorium, and saw at the end of Nitro both Booker T and Bill Goldberg down and hurt after an attack by Jeff Jarrett and John Cena on Booker and the franchise players on Goldberg. We also saw Ric Flair speak to a number of people from his past, trying to get them to watch his back as he approached his match with Rick Steiner on this week's show. And DDP apologised for the actions of his partner Kevin Nash on the previous week's episode, which had earned Nash a 1-week suspension after he'd shoved over referee Billy Silverman. So, as promised, now we're going to go into Nitro. And first of all, we got some dark matches. As you'll see, we're at the Grand Canyon University Arena in Arizona. That's interesting. And one of the things you'll notice here is that the attendance is not on the screen, and that's because both Nitro and Saturday Night is taking place on the same taping, and you get the attendance figure when you do your second show of the night, because obviously they don't know what you've booked for that show. That might affect the attendance. It was interesting. I had to think about this a little bit as to whether I was going to do Nitro first or and then Saturday Night, or the other way around. Obviously Nitro will likely have the far bigger main event, but I just felt in terms of the canon on screen, Saturday Night will come chronologically after Nitro, so I figured let's just do it afterwards, and people can leave the arena if they want to and they don't want to watch Saturday Night. But you know, I just think doing Nitro first, even though it's a bit of a strange way round, because obviously the biggest match will not be on last, it will at least allow us to do things chronologically. We're also going to do just one dark match now, given that we've got the additional show. We don't need to book as many matches because we will be using more wrestlers in general each week. And here, Lex Luger defeats Lash LaRue in 6 minutes and 22 seconds by submission for a segment rating of 55. Lex Luger a 56, Lash LaRue a 35. Luger has not performed superbly, like he's being outperformed by Bagwell at the moment. But as a tag team, they're really good, and so this was just a sort of a bit of a boost for Luger and a chance to get him on the show. WCW Nitro itself begins with Great Sasuke versus Jamie Noble in a Cruiserweight title match, and in a decent wrestling but didn't have much heat. Great Sasuke defeated Jamie Noble 11:51 by pinfall. The Great Sasuke makes his first defense of the WCW Cruiserweight title, and Sasuke here really good now. In-ring performance of 63, Jamie Noble of 55, a segment rating of 61. The pair have great chemistry as well. Really pleased with this match, and Great Sasuke now really kind of obviously his popularity has moved up a little bit since he began the game, since we first brought him in, I should say, and he is now benefiting from that in terms of the quality of his overall matches. Next, we had Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler at ringside, and Mike Tenay says that tonight's show is a big one for many reasons. Firstly, our main event as Ric Flair faces Rick Steiner, where unfortunately for the Nature Boy, he doesn't have anybody to watch his back. On top of that, we have Curt Hennig in a match with Lance Storm, the Insiders in action, and a 6-man match pitting all 3 members of the Filthy Animals against all 3 members of the Mamelukes. Lawler then excitedly encourages Tenay to tell them the rest of the big news. Tenay says that next week on Nitro is a special 300th episode spectacular Nitro 300. He then also says that WCW Saturday Night returns to the airwaves this coming weekend as WCW goes from strength to strength. Another decent rating here, 61 between Mike Tenay and Jerry Lawler. They are generally pretty good when they do these little segments. In the next segment, we have Mike Awesome versus Bobby Eaton in a non-title match, and Mike Awesome wins in 7:34 by pinfall. A segment rate of 65. Mike Awesome, another really good in-ring performance, this time of 74. Bobby Eaton 38. Yeah, really decent. Bobby Eaton was off his game, but it didn't affect the rating too much. A 65 here. After the match, Mike Awesome kicks Bobby Eaton out of the ring as if he was nothing. So a little extra additional segment here, a rating of 52. So then we have the latest match in the women's title round robin, and Ronnie Stevens defeats Jillian Hall. Going into this match, both women were on 1 loss and 1 win. Segment rating of 2, so absolutely dreadful. And this is the reason why we are now kind of talking about getting them onto Saturday night, because you can see here the crowd were turning up by having a match outside of the pre-show between workers they don't have any investment in. So this is the reason really. Now we've got to medium size, and we're going to get those penalties when we have 2 wrestlers who are basically at jobber level, at least in the eyes of the fans. And so we now need to that's why we want to kind of put them over on Saturday night. We will be doing that, but not this. Just so happened on this show I had a little gap of time, and this was the best thing I could fill it with. But going forward, I think we'll probably be seeing these matches on Saturday night from now on. So we go backstage to Tony Schiavone, and he's with Terry Funk for an interview. Schiavone says that Funk will be one-on-one in one of the big matches this week on WCW Saturday Night when he takes on Kanyon. He asks him what his game plan will be. Funk laughs and asks Schiavone if he really thinks he's ever had a game plan in one of his matches. Just then, Ric Flair arrives on the scene and says that Funk has always been a great opponent for him, and they have always had tremendous respect for one another. He then asks Funk if he would mind watching his back during tonight's main event. Funk laughs again and says Flair can go to hell, then walks off. So segment rating of 62 here, really decent between Flair and Funk. Tony Schiavone, though, performed poorly. Next up, we see the Insiders take on Mark Jindrak and Sean Stasiak. And in this match, once Kevin Nash tags in, he is very aggressive with his opponents, with DDP even having to tell him to take it easy as the match wears on. Eventually, Nash pins Stasiak after a powerbomb. For a segment rating here of only 47, the match went 7 minutes and 11 seconds. And obviously, Stasiak and Jindrak have just been treated as jobbers, really, since the relaunch of WCW. And that's why this wasn't a particularly exciting match. But whatever the case, the Insiders have got the victory here. In the next segment, the cameras go backstage to find Tony Schiavone in the office of Eric Bischoff. Bischoff thanks Schiavone for joining him and says he has a few matters of business to announce. Firstly, he says that next week a new #1 contender to the United States title will be crowned as a 4-way match will take place. He says that Curt Hennig and Lance Storm will both be in the match, and they will be joined by 2 others yet to be decided. Those positions will be decided on the return episode of WCW Saturday Night when Tommy Dreamer faces Bam Bam Bigelow and Terry Funk takes on Kanyon, with both winners qualifying for the match. He says, speaking of the return of WCW Saturday Night, he reviewed the events of last week and he is punishing Jeff Jarrett and John Cena for their actions by putting them in a tag match on the show this weekend against the European Union. As for the franchise players, Bischoff says he's not only considered what happened on Nitro last week, but also everything that's taken place over the past couple of months. And given the way Chronic are insisting in getting involved in matches between Douglas and Goldberg, he's making the match at Slamboree a cage match. So segment rating here 52. Eric Bischoff was really good. Nothing much to say about the rating there. This is followed up by a singles match between Curt Hennig and Lance Storm. The announcers reiterate the message from Bischoff during the match that both men will be in next week's 4-way match for the US title shot, so the psychological advantage is up for grabs in this one. Eventually, Hennig hits the Hennigplex, but Mike Awesome then jumps in the ring and attacks him, prompting the referee to disqualify Lance Storm. A segment rating here of 60. Curt Hennig had a performance of 66, Lance Storm is 73. This would have, and they've got great chemistry as well, this would have been a far better segment rating if we hadn't messed up when we first introduced Curt Hennig and the game didn't think he was a heel, because the game thinks he's a heel, so it thinks it's a heel versus heel match, which always gives us a penalty given our product specifications, and therefore the rating was brought down a little, but still a really decent match here between these two. After the match, Hennig and Awesome start to brawl, and eventually Storm joins Awesome until Bobby Eaton runs to the ring to help Hennig. Eventually, officials and referees fill the ring and hold the 4 men apart. So this one got a segment rating of 54. Pretty decent segment here. Bobby Eaton obviously joins Curt Hennig after what happened to him earlier in the show. Immediately following this and the brawl dying down, Ric Flair emerges in the ring with a microphone and calls out to Arn Anderson, who has just been dealing with the brawl, to come to the ring. Flair says that he's run out of time, he's got nobody to watch his back, and his match is just a few minutes away. He says that Arn Anderson has always been his most trusted friend, his right-hand man, the enforcer. He tells Anderson that he's tried everything else and asks Arn to watch his back tonight. Arn Anderson tells Flair that he's not the enforcer anymore. He's left that life behind, and now he's a staff member, an agent, an official for WCW. He says not only does he not want to watch Flair's back, but he couldn't anyway, as it would likely mean his job. Anderson walks away as Flair drops his head wearily. So a brilliant segment here of 77. Ric Flair and Arn Anderson looking really great. And Ric Flair, it seems, his last option in terms of getting someone to watch his back has been scuppered with this segment. Then we get the 6-man tag match that was promised earlier in the night. The announcers remind us that the FBI will challenge Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman at Slamboree for the Cruiserweight tag titles during this match. And what happens in the end is that Conan pins Johnny the Bull in 10:27 to get the victory for his team. This got a segment rating of 50. Rey Mysterio Jr. looked really good, a 78. Not so great Johnny the Bull, 25. Frankie Cicero and James Maritato are doing all right. They're growing into kind of their role here. And it was a decent match. So next, Tony Schiavone stands in the center of the ring and introduces his guest, the man who will face Booker T for the WCW World Title Slamboree in 3 weeks' time, Jeff Jarrett. Jarrett comes out flanked by bodyguard John Cena. Schiavone asks Jarrett what he makes of Bischoff's announcement earlier tonight that he and Cena will face the European Union on Saturday night. Jarrett says that he's not surprised. Ever since WCW relaunched, a foul stench of corruption has hung in the air around Eric Bischoff, and this was just another example of how low he'll stoop to keep a man like him down. Schiavone then asks him how he's feeling just 3 weeks out from his big title match. Jarrett responds by asking Schiavone whether there is even going to be a match. Schiavone says he doesn't follow. Jarrett says that so far he's not seen a contract or anything written down that confirms there is a match at Slamboree, and he thinks that Booker T is trying to wriggle out of a match with him. This prompts Booker T to then come out and walk to the ring. John Steiner stands in front of Jarrett to protect him from Booker. Booker T says if Jarrett wants a fight, he's ready, let's do it now. Jarrett fires back, however, that he only fights official matches and accuses Booker of being afraid to put the title on the line against him. In response, Booker then offers to sign the contract live in the ring next week on Nitro 300 to make their match official, if it means that much to him. Jarrett accepts, and Booker T's music plays as the show goes to a break. So segment rating here of 60. Booker T looked like a real star. Jarrett was poor. John Cena looked poor. And Tony Schiavone wasn't great either, going off script. But still, a segment rating of 60, so I'm pretty happy with that one. And now it's time for the main event, Ric Flair versus Rick Steiner. And in a bout that had fantastic heat and great wrestling, Ric Flair defeated Rick Steiner in 14 minutes 34 by pinfall with no interference taking place. A segment rating of 76, Flair a rating of 85, so he's in fantastic form in the ring. Apparently, according to the game, Rick Steiner had an in-ring performance of 68, but a really good main event here to end Nitro. After the match, though, as feared, Scott Steiner came to the ring and he and his brother attacked the Nature Boy, beating him down. Arn Anderson then appeared and walked to the ring as the Steiners pause their beatdown of Flair and look to Double A. Arn has a mic and gets in the ring and then says that he's not here to fight. He's here in an official capacity as a WCW agent to break up the fight. The Steiners look at each other for a moment, then attack Anderson too. With both men down and being beaten up, Sting then arrives on the scene with his bat and drives off the Steiner brothers. With the crowd going mad, Sting then grabs the mic and calls to the Steiners, challenging them to a match on Nitro 300 against him and Flair next week. Scott Steiner can be heard to shout, "You got it," just before the show goes off the air. So all of these segments at about a 70 or up to 74. Apparently Sting didn't do well without a script to follow, but it was a really good segment, really heated, really happy with the way this all came off. So the main event of next week's episode of Nitro 300, has been officially put into place. It will be the Steiner Brothers versus Sting and Ric Flair. And that is the show. A pretty meaty one in terms of angles. We had 6 consecutive angles at the end of the show, although they were all basically one. It's just it was easier to put them in as 4 different ones. A great main event between Ric Flair and Rick Steiner. This has increased our popularity everywhere, which is obviously a real positive. A decent match between Curt Hennig and Lance Storm, which we're really happy about. Flair in general was really good during his segments. Mike Awesome versus Bobby Eaton was a really good match, 65. The Cruiserweight title match was a really good match, obviously a 61. Yeah, just generally really happy with the quality of the show here. One of the best episodes, I think, of Nitro that we've had so far. And now we've got to book WCW Saturday night, so if you'll forgive me, I'm going to go away for a few moments, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, here is then the returning episode of WCW Saturday Night. You can see that our attendance is 1,899 for the entire night of action. And the segment we start with is Kanyon in the ring, awaiting the arrival of Terry Funk for his match. And Terry Funk's music comes on, but he does not appear. Kanyon waits around looking perplexed by where Funk might be, and still no Terry Funk comes out. Eventually, the ring announcer announces that if Funk doesn't come out within 10 seconds, he will forfeit the match, and Funk does not appear. So Kanyon wins by forfeit and will proceed to the WCW United States #1 contender 4-way match on Nitro. Segment rating 44 here. This is pretty much just Kanyon stood in the ring, so can't be too unhappy with that particular rating. After this, we get the American Mavericks versus a pair of jobbers, Seth Delay and Eric Matlock. And in a segment rating of 62, American Mavericks defeat them in 7:27 when Chris Harris pins Matlock. So this was just a match to give Storm and Harris some more exposure and some more experience. They have some great chemistry teaming together. So do Delay and Matlock, which is interesting. Not that we're going to use them again, but anyway, Matlock looked all right. Seth Delay only a 16, but yeah, Chris Harris and James Storm just gradually need to be built back up. We've obviously been using them as jobbers for some time, and now we're trying to renew their push. So this was a chance just to give them a good, decisive victory on television. In the next match, Bam Bam Bigelow takes on Tommy Dreamer for the second place, or the fourth place, I suppose, actually, in that four-way match on Nitro. And this one, Tommy Dreamer defeats Bam Bam Bigelow in 13 minutes and 4 seconds when Kanyon comes out to the ring and attempts to interfere on Tommy Dreamer's behalf, but instead of hitting Dreamer, actually hits Bam Bam Bigelow when Dreamer gets out of the way, and Dreamer gets the victory. Dreamer a ring performance of 60, Bigelow a 47, segment rating of 54. Bigelow was really off his game, and at the announcing desk, Stevie Ray was pretty weak. I should mention that Tony Schiavone and Stevie Ray are our commentators for WCW Saturday Night. Then we had an angle featuring Scott Hudson. So Scott Hudson basically is backstage and he's reporting on what happened to Terry Funk earlier when he missed his match. He says that though the cameras didn't catch it, he managed to get there well before the cameras and saw that Terry Funk had been beaten down by an unknown assailant. Funk was then taken off to hospital in an ambulance, which meant that Funk could not appear in the match against Kanyon. This was a really poor segment, only 18, but Scott Hudson's not exactly the best, at least according to the game. And yeah, this just explained Funk's absence. In truth, and I'll make a confession here, in truth, I've forgotten that Terry Funk wasn't contracted to work on B-level shows. So he's only contracted to work on A-level shows, i.e. Nitro and the pay-per-views. So I couldn't use Terry Funk in the match with Kanyon, so I had to come up with some story reason why that match didn't happen. Still, never mind. This was fine. Then we get another squash match. Reno defeating Rob Williams in 6 minutes and 12 seconds by pinfall. A segment rating of 17 here. Reno had an in-ring performance of 28. Again, somebody we just haven't used very much, and when we have used him, it's been largely in a jobber role. So we're now trying to kind of build him back up and give him some victories, and he was pretty dominant in this one. So finally, we end up with the Jeff Jarrett and John Cena versus the European Union Tag Team match, which ends in 14:29 when Jeff Jarrett pins Norman Smiley. And the story of this particular match is that John Cena did the bulk of the work for his team, but then when John Cena had finished Norman Smiley off, Jeff Jarrett insisted to be tagged in and took the pinfall for himself. A segment rating of 53, Jeff Jarrett at 68, Norman Smiley at 54, Alex Wright at 46, Cena only at 33, but he's creeping up and his popularity should also be moving in the right direction as well. So that is the first episode of WCW Saturday Night Back. We won't spend as much time on Saturday night in general because it's obviously only, first of all, a 1 hour show, and secondly, we'll feature probably in the main quite a lot of jobber matches. As I say, the whole point of this is to increase the popularity of some of our wrestlers and give them some experience. And for those who don't know, the thing with B shows in terms of the game, B shows are classed as shows that don't affect your popularity in any way, so you can kind of it's just free time to put other matches on to give you the chance to give sort of younger guys experience and exposure. But an overall rating of 48, that's not too bad, and the tag team match and Tommy Dreamer versus Bam Bam Bigelow were pretty good as well. So that's the week's television taken care of, and we are another week closer to Slamboree, which is still 2 weeks away. But we've set up obviously the main event for Nitro 300, which will see Ric Flair and Sting take on the Steiner Brothers. We've also got that US title #1 contender match, which will feature Tommy Dreamer, Kanyon, Curt Hennig, and Lance Storm against one another. So a couple of big matches signed for next week's Nitro, and looking forward to bringing that to you in the next episode. As for this episode of the show, we are done. So thank you very much for joining me today. If you enjoyed the show today, give us a like down below and also a subscribe if you want to continue to carry on following the series as it goes towards Slamboree. Until next time, though, thank you very much for watching.